Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the first full trailer for Stranger Things 5. Now, I'm going to break down all the reveals in this trailer, but watching it, I also had to think, like, how could I be so excited about this season of TV, but also at the same time think maybe they should have stopped at season 1. Now, we're going to talk about all that later, but for now, let's break this baby down. So we start with a storm in the Upside Down at the Creel house. Now, you'll remember in Stranger Things season 4, we found out that the villain of the series, Vecna, grew up in this house, and he was still living there in the Upside Down. Now for him, this is symbolic because this is where his journey began. It's where his powers first manifested, and it's also where he is beginning his quest to completely take over the world.
4 kills, 4 gates, end of the world.
Now the song playing in the trailer is Who Wants to Live Forever by Queen. The subtext here, of course, is not all these characters are going to make it out of this season. I mean, I think Stranger Things has been kind of soft on their characters so far. We had the fake Will death in season 1, of course they killed Barb, but for the most part, the show has stuck to that axiom that kids don't die. This season, though, these guys aren't kids anymore, so all bets are off. In fact, let me know who you think is going to die down in the comments. So then we see Dustin going to school, still proudly wearing his Hellfire Club shirt. Now remember, last season, this was the name of their D&D club that was led by Eddie, who gave his life to save his friends and the town. But everyone in the town still thinks that Eddie was some sort of demonic club leader tying into the satanic panic of the 80s. So Stranger Things actually showed some behind the scenes photos that show Dustin at the graveyard with his face bloody. Probably he was visiting Eddie's grave and then got in a fight to stand up for his friend. So the fact that he's still wearing this shirt is a pretty big deal. Remember, season 4 ended with this rift opening up under Hawkins that looked demonic. So it's likely that a lot of people in town probably think that Eddie's Hellfire Club was responsible. So Dustin wearing this shirt is a way for him to be brave and keep Eddie's memory alive. Now here we can see the devastation of Hawkins from overhead. You can see not only destroyed buildings that have not been repaired 6 months later, but you can also see this base camp that the government has installed. A lot of the action in the trailer centers around this base camp. And then we see Mike on the roof of a radio station saying, "We're stuck here." Now the radio station is important, I think, because we see lots of radio stations, towers, and antenna throughout the trailer. I'm wondering if maybe the government is jamming signals so they can't communicate with ham radio to outside of the town. So it could be that they have to use this radio tower we see later in the trailer to amplify a signal to communicate outside of town. But I think it's more likely that they figure out a way to use the radio towers to amplify Eleven's powers. This would also bring the series full circle because remember, walkie-talkies and radio were a key part of season 1. The team were able to use walkie-talkies to hear Will in the Upside Down.
Oh, let me know. Should I stay or should I go?
And then we see that the military has set up some kind of quarantine zone. So this is a part of Stranger Things that's always very hard for the showrunners to balance. On the one hand, they want it to be this fantastical world with these monsters breaking into our world. But on the other, they also have to keep it, kind of grounded and in the real world. So what would happen in America if suddenly a demonic rift opened up? All hell would break loose and life as we know it would stop.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
So it looks like what they've done here is the government has set up this kind of a base camp with fences and gates, and they're probably calling it a quarantine zone, like the natural disaster in Hawkins has released something into the air and the population maybe is diseased, so they have to keep them contained. And then we see an underground tunnel, just like in season 2, and we're going to see this all the way through the trailer with various callbacks to past seasons, which is funny given that those past seasons were in fact callbacks to old 80s movies. Now my favorite part of Stranger Things is always seeing how they can take all of these specific tropes from my favorite 80s movies, but then they're able to combine them into one show. It's like I'm getting to watch all of my favorite movies combined. And that's also why Star Wars works so well. It combines Westerns with classic sci-fi stories like Foundation. What's Foundation? Well, Foundation's this epic sci-fi series by Isaac Asimov, and of course they turned it into an Apple TV show, and it's where George Lucas got the idea for a citywide planet as the capital of the galactic government. The thing is, I love these books. They have such a huge scope with so much intricate detail about politics and space battles and interplanetary trade. So lately, I've been able to explore all of that myself with Foundation Galactic Frontier. So Foundation Galactic Frontier is the sponsor of today's video, and I am so excited that there is finally a game set in this universe. Not only does it loyally adapt one of the greatest sci-fi stories of all time, but it also features new stories about Harry Seldon, the Mule, and the Emperor. Here in this footage, you can see Easter eggs like Asimov's image in this bottle, references to a blue-eyed stranger meeting the Mule. This is the original cover of the first Foundation novel, and this is a nod to Asimov's 3 Laws, and here we have a post-it note about a Seldon crisis. This is the kind of game that's great for loyal fans or if you're just learning about this universe for the first time. It's an RPG style game that lets you roam through the Foundation universe and experience the era of traitors while defeating waves of enemies along the way. This game allows you to create a fleet of your own spaceships, recruit members of your crew, team up with allies, and create a guild with other players. So you start off as a space trader, and then you explore planets with ground battles and command a fleet of spacecraft to explore other worlds. You can even build and customize your spaceship's cabin and customize your fleet to match your playing style.
Wow, this game really has something for everyone.
Yes, and what I love most about the game is that there are dozens of galaxies to explore and endless ways to play. Everything from answering distress calls from other players to deploying your fleet in battle. You can play on mobile or PC. Now on mobile, you can dive into the universe anytime or anywhere, but on PC, the game offers greater immersion. But both versions are synchronized, so you can seamlessly switch between devices with the same progress. Foundation Galactic Frontier offers individual story modes and player versus player gameplay, so you and all your friends can conquer the galaxy together.
And that is the power of friendship.
Guys, this game is so much fun, and I love being able to explore space freely on my own from the comfort of my phone. I highly encourage you guys to check it out for yourselves. Use my link below and download now to get free heroes and battleships, and use my exclusive code ScreenCrush, all lowercase, to get more in-game rewards, and then I'll see you in-game. Now, back to what I was saying. Now here the team discovers a secret passageway. This is interesting though. Where is this passageway? I guess it could be in the new military base, but I don't know why they would install secret passageways there. I think this is probably in the old Hawkins lab. Like maybe they were able to get past the fence and escape and go to the lab to look for clues or a different passageway into the Upside Down. After all, the lab is where Eleven sent Vecna years ago, and it's where she first opened up the rift that created the Upside Down. So it could be that the key to defeating Vecna is where it all began, back at the laboratory. Or it could also be that the Russians built more than one entrance to the tunnels that they built back in Season 3. Or this could just be a hidden tunnel in their new headquarters that I'll talk about in just a bit. Now, I want to remind everybody, there's going to be a significant time jump here. In this shot, we can see why. Everybody is a lot older than they were when Season 4 ended. But it's good to see the band back together as everybody stands around this table, which again goes full circle to how they started the show, with the boys gathered around a table playing D&D. And notice there's a map of the town behind them that Mike uses to plan his real-life D&D campaign that we're going to see in just a little bit. And how about this reveal? It looks like Eleven can fly now. She can use her telekinesis to jump over this gate.
I fly now?
This is followed by lots of character shots. We have Joyce looking anguished like she always does, worried about her son. And then we see Mike looking at her. Now notice behind him we see all these dials and meters and a ton of vinyl on the walls.
Oh, is that where Murray lives?
No. I think this is the radio station that's outside of town. This is the same building where we see Mike and Eleven having a conversation early in the trailer, and we see it in a wide shot here. I think the team escapes the Hawkins quarantine zone and then hides out in this radio station. This would also explain why they have a large map of the city, because the radio station would have to chart the coverage area they have over their territory. And then we see Eleven respond to what Mike has been saying that
this isn't like one of your campaigns.
But then we see Mike doing just that, placing a D&D figure on a map of the town. Now remember, D&D characters have been used to identify monsters and plan strategy on basically every season of the show. In Season 1, Eleven explained the Upside Down by flipping the D&D board upside down. And the Demogorgon and the Mind Flayer were both named after monsters in D&D. And this shot's really interesting. We see Will front and center with everybody behind him kind of prepping, but then he is sort of stepping away. Now, we saw this in Season 2 when the Mind Flayer was calling out to him, but now we know that it was actually Vecna who was behind the Mind Flayer to begin with. And I think we're seeing the same thing here. At the end of the trailer, we see that Vecna still has plans for Will, and all throughout the season, he's going to hear him calling out. Nancy and Jonathan then see the true danger of what's happening, another rift opening up in the sky, not just to the Upside Down, but to that red hellish world that Vecna was first exiled to. And then we see, I think this is Murray and definitely Robin, and they're watching all these holes to this hellish world open up on the ground. But I think it's weird that they're not really running away, so that kind of makes me think this might be a vision, a shared vision that they're seeing together. But then again, later in the trailer, we do see Demogorgons hop out of these pits, so maybe they're just so shocked they're not moving anywhere. And then we see Eleven running on rooftops, and this really starts to show off the absolutely enormous budget that they have for this season. Each episode has a budget of between $50 50 and 60 million, with reports as high as $480 million for the entirety of season 5. Now this is a big evolution in the show because the first season was pretty low budget and small, and now the Duffer Brothers want to send us out on this grand scale with each episode nearly 2 hours long. And then we see Hopper and Eleven fighting alongside one another, which again brings their character journey full circle. Remember, in past seasons he didn't fully trust Eleven. He wanted to keep her safe and keep her sheltered, which stemmed from his own trauma of not being able to save his own daughter from dying. And then we see Eleven using her powers, followed by a blast emanating from the Hawkins lab in the Upside Down. So again, this makes me think that the secret passageway we saw earlier was in the original Hawkins lab. Maybe they had to enter the Upside Down through the lab so they could get to a particular radio antenna so Eleven could broadcast some sort of signal that would attack all of Vecna's monsters at once. And then we see Caleb facing down a Demogorgon in a tunnel. Now in past trailers we have seen that Caleb was at Max's bedside while she was in a coma, and later in the trailer we see him carrying her comatose body from the hospital as they're being chased by Demodogs. I'm wondering if this shot of Caleb facing down a Demogorgon could actually be in Max's mind. Maybe Eleven creates some kind of telepathic connection between Max and Caleb that allows him to enter her mind and try to pull her out of her coma. Remember, last season she had to listen to Kate Bush to keep Vecna's influence away from her, and essentially Kate Bush saved her life. So it could be that Caleb is still playing Kate Bush for her at her bedside, or it could be a different song from her mixtape. And notice that Caleb is wearing a sweatshirt from the radio station that looks brand new, so this is further proof that they are holed up in the radio station as a headquarters. Then they found this swag to wear, but now Caleb has gone back into the town to rescue Max from the hospital. If you're looking for 80s references, this is a lot like when Elliot rescued E.T. from the military lab that they set up in his house. Also, side note, notice how the station's nickname is The Squawk because that rhymes with Hawkins, Indiana. And then we see Nancy with a machine gun. Okay, this show's escalating a lot, right? Like the first season was really cool because like Nancy and Jonathan and Steve were doing the Nightmare on Elm Street thing and like fighting the Demogorgon with homemade weapons, but now she's going full Linda Hamilton from Terminator 2. It's not that I mind Nancy being able to use a machine gun, it just seems like it's a little much. Am I wrong? But I'll talk about my feelings on that in a second. And then we see Dustin wearing sniper camouflage, followed by this car speeding along with an antenna on top. Again, this makes me think they're using radio signals in some way to fight Vecna. And this is intercut with Eleven in the Upside Down hurling gravestones, which could be a reference to Eddie. I don't know. We know that Dustin visits Eddie's grave, and now here we see Eleven in a graveyard. I'm not saying they're going to bring Eddie back, but what if Vecna, if they want to really shake this series up, is able to reanimate the dead, or at least reanimate the dead in the Upside Down? Look, I know it's a stretch, but I really like Eddie and I miss him in the show, and I will take whatever zombie version of him that I can get. And then we see an all grown up Holly Wheeler running to her mom. Now, Holly has been a background character all through this series, but because the kids have now aged up to teenagers, they kind of have to bring in a new group of youngsters, like these kids. We see Mike defending a new group of precocious kids. In fact, maybe it would be cool if we actually start the season from these kids' point of view before the kids that we know step in and help them along their journey. Again, this season seems like it's all about callbacks and things coming full circle, so I could see that happening. And then we see the military fighting these Demogorgons that are hopping out of the ground. Notice the Radio Shack in the background. Maybe this is a Radio Shack they got spare parts from in order to build some kind of antenna to amplify Eleven's powers. Now, the Demogorgons are attacking the same base that we saw from overhead earlier, and then Vecna arrives in our world. And once again, he uses Will like we saw in season 2. Now, I should also note that in the trailer we see Linda Hamilton being a total badass. Now, Linda Hamilton obviously played Sarah Connor, and she is an icon when it comes to female action heroes. Like in past seasons of the show, I love how they're bringing back classic actors from 80s movies and then giving them roles in these seasons. And seeing Linda Hamilton here is just fun. I love Linda Hamilton. I love seeing her kicking ass in this trailer. Look, the Duffer Brothers are great. They are at the top of their craft. I have enjoyed every season of this show except for season 3. I couldn't buy the Russians in the mall. Yet, I'm watching this and I'm seeing the huge budget and scale, and I'm so excited to see what happens to these characters. I'm so excited to see this fun sci-fi adventure come to an end. But on the other hand, I always go back to that last scene of season 1. You know, when Will's in the bathroom and he throws up the slug and he flashes into the Upside Down. And I always think, God, what a mic drop, you know? I've always been a little disappointed that they kept going after that. I think Stranger Things could have just been some kind of anthology show where each season then introduces a different group and maybe uses different 80s movies. Like, it's really cool how future seasons 2 through 4 would continue to call back to like other 80s films, especially sequels. That was all really cool. But that first season, man, that was perfect. The way they seamlessly combine kid adventures like Goonies and E.T. with like teen horror like Nightmare on Elm Street and all this conspiracy thriller stuff like Alien and Poltergeist, it was so great to see all of my favorite stuff in one show, but with characters that I actually cared about. And I'm looking at all this and I'm going, has any of this really enriched the experience of season 1? For me, I just love these characters. So I'm the kind of guy, I'll watch anything with characters I love. I'll watch any Indiana Jones thing, no matter how old Harrison Ford gets. But I do think that maybe from a storytelling perspective, they probably should have stopped 10 years ago. But I want to know what you guys think. Are you hyped for Stranger Things season 5? Or are you basically just checking in at this point because you're a completionist and you have to know how things end? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, or you can at me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, or our free to join Discord server. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.